Time does not pause for confusion. It does not slow down for fear. And it does not care about your excuses. Every day you wait, the cost compounds. Every delay strengthens the habit of hesitation. This audiobook is built on one decision. Not someday, not eventually, not when you feel ready now. Because there are only two types of people. Those who say one day, and those who decide day one. The clock is ticking whether you move or not. So the question is simple. Will today be another excuse, or the beginning of everything? Welcome to a chapter a day. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Chapter 1. Someday is a lie. Someday sounds harmless. It sounds responsible. It sounds patient. But someday is not a plan. Someday is a delay mechanism. Someday is how goals die slowly. Let's be clear from the start. If you are waiting for someday, you are not confused. You are avoiding commitment. That's the key. Someday gives your brain comfort without cost. It lets you feel productive without taking risk. It gives you emotional relief while stealing real progress. And the most dangerous part? Someday never feels like quitting. It feels like being smart. It feels like waiting for the right time. But there is no right time. There is only now or never. You have a choice. Look at the people around you. The ones who talk the most about what they're going to do. The book they're going to write. The body they're going to build. The business they're going to start. Listen carefully to their language. It's not the right time. I just need to get ready. I'm waiting until things calm down. That's not strategy. That's fear wearing a suit. Someday is how goals die slowly. Because while you're waiting, time is moving. While you're preparing, life is passing. While you're thinking, opportunities are closing. And time does not negotiate. Time does not care about your intentions. Time only responds to action. You don't need their permission. Not your family's. Not your friends. Not society's invisible approval. You don't need permission to start badly. You don't need permission to be new. You don't need permission to move before you feel confident. That's the key. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they postpone the moment of embarrassment. They fail because they don't want to look stupid at the beginning. So they choose someday. They plan. They research. They consume content. They tell themselves they're getting ready. But readiness is a lie too. You don't get ready then act. You act, and readiness is forced to catch up. You have a choice. Either you accept temporary discomfort now, or you accept permanent regret later. And regret is heavy. Regret is quiet. Regret doesn't scream at you today. It whispers to you years from now. Why didn't you start? Why did you wait? Why did you waste so much time preparing for a life you never entered? That's the cost of someday. Someday is how goals die slowly. Look at real life. Not highlight reels. Not motivational quotes. Real life. The people who changed their lives didn't feel ready. They didn't feel confident. They didn't feel supported. They felt nervous. They felt exposed. They felt unsure. And they moved anyway. It's not about motivation. It's not about confidence. It's not about talent. It's about decision. That's the key. The moment you decide, your behavior changes. The moment you decide, excuses lose power. The moment you decide, your calendar tells the truth. Before the decision, everything is negotiable. After the decision, action becomes non-negotiable. You don't need their permission. You need your own authority. Ask yourself honestly, how long have you been saying someday? 6 months? A year? 5 years? And what has someday given you so far? Nothing. No results. No momentum. No identity shift. Just familiar frustration. Someday keeps you in the same mental loop. Thinking instead of doing. Planning instead of building. Talking instead of executing. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to leave. Because inaction hardens into identity. You stop being someone who hasn't started yet. You become someone who never starts. That's dangerous. Someday is how goals die slowly. You have a choice. Right now, as you're listening to this, you are either reinforcing delay or breaking it. Every time you tell yourself later, you strengthen the habit of hesitation. Every time you tell yourself now, you weaken fear. That's the key. Fear doesn't disappear through thinking. Fear disappears through movement. The first action is always uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Discomfort is not a warning sign. It's a confirmation. It means you've reached the edge of your old identity. And that's exactly where growth begins. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a flawless plan. You need a starting point. Start messy. Start small. Start embarrassed if you have to. But start. Because once you start, something changes. You stop fantasizing and start participating. You stop consuming and start creating. You stop waiting and start becoming. That's the shift. Most people wait for clarity. But clarity comes after action, not before. You don't see the full staircase. You see the first step. And that's enough. You have a choice. You can keep someday alive. Or you can kill it. Kill it by deciding that today matters. Kill it by taking one uncomfortable action today. Kill it by refusing to let another day pass unused. Because someday doesn't fail loudly. It fails quietly. It fails through delay. It fails through comfort. Someday is how goals die slowly. And here's the hard truth. No one is coming to rescue your potential. No one is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Now it's time." Time is already moving. The clock is already ticking. With or without you. You don't need their permission. You need to move. This chapter is about one thing. Ending the lie of someday. Once you do that, everything else becomes possible. Momentum, discipline, confidence. But none of that comes before the decision. You kill someday first. You choose day one. And once you choose day one, you step into the real game, the game of action, responsibility, and execution. You've confronted the lie. Now it's time to understand what actually creates clarity. You stopped waiting for someday. Now let's talk about what happens when you move before you feel ready. Chapter 2. Clarity comes after action. Most people are waiting for a feeling that never arrives. They're waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel confident, waiting to feel certain. And while they wait, nothing changes. Let's say this clearly. Waiting to feel ready is backward. Readiness is not the starting point. Action is. You don't think your way into action. You act your way into clarity. That's the key. Clarity is not something you sit down and discover. It's not something that magically appears after enough thinking. Clarity is a byproduct of movement. But the human mind loves comfort. And thinking feels safer than doing. Planning feels safer than risking. Imagining feels safer than executing. So people stay stuck in their heads, running scenarios, playing out futures, trying to eliminate uncertainty before they move. And that's exactly why they don't move. You have a choice. You can keep waiting for certainty, or you can accept uncertainty and move anyway. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. You will never feel ready before you start. Ready is a reward, not a requirement. That's the key. Look at real life again. Not theory. Not motivation posters. Careers are not built by people who knew exactly what they were doing. They're built by people who started imperfectly and adjusted in motion. Fitness is not built by people who felt confident in the gym on day one. It's built by people who showed up awkward, weak, and unsure, and kept showing up. Businesses are not built by people with perfect plans. They're built by people who launched messy, learned fast, and corrected course. Action first. Clarity later. You don't think your way into action. You act your way into clarity. Most people get this wrong. They think confusion means stop. They think doubt means wait. They think fear means not yet. But confusion is information. Doubt is feedback. Fear is a sign you're standing at the edge of growth. Stillness doesn't solve any of that. Movement does. You don't need their permission. Not to try. Not to pivot. Not to be wrong. Waiting for approval is just another form of delay. That's the key. Ask yourself this honestly. How many times have you said, "I just need to figure it out first"? Figure out what? Everything. That's impossible. You figure things out by doing. You learn what works by trying what doesn't. You gain clarity by being in the arena, not by watching from the sidelines. But your mind hates that answer. Because action exposes you. Action removes excuses. Action forces accountability. So the mind says, think a little longer. Prepare a little more. Wait just a bit. And weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. That's the cost. You have a choice. You can stay confused forever by refusing to move. Or you can accept temporary confusion and move anyway. And here's the paradox. The moment you move, confusion starts to clear. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But enough. Enough to take the next step. Enough to make the next decision. That's how progress actually works. You don't need a 10-year plan. You need a next action. That's the key. One workout. One application. One conversation. One attempt. Clarity does not arrive as a grand revelation. It arrives as small corrections made in motion. Most people want guarantees before they commit. But guarantees only come after commitment. Confidence doesn't precede action. Confidence is built through action. You don't need their permission. You don't need to feel brave. You need to move. Look at the people you admire. The ones doing what you want to do. They didn't start clear. They started committed. They were willing to look foolish. They were willing to be wrong. They were willing to adjust. That's why they're ahead. Meanwhile, the people waiting for clarity are still waiting. You don't think your way into action. You act your way into clarity. Say it again. You don't think your way into action. You act your way into clarity. Repetition matters because your old habits are loud, and hesitation has momentum. You have to interrupt it with movement, even small movement, especially small movement, because action breaks the mental loop. Action collapses overthinking. Action exposes what matters and what doesn't. You learn faster by doing one imperfect thing than by thinking about 10 perfect ones. That's the key. And let's be honest about fear for a moment. Fear doesn't disappear when you wait. It multiplies. The longer you delay, the bigger the thing becomes in your mind. The heavier it feels. The more intimidating it gets. Action shrinks fear. Motion reduces threat. The first step is always the hardest, not because it's complex, but because it's symbolic. It means you've stopped hiding. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped lying to yourself about being almost ready. You've chosen engagement over avoidance. You have a choice. Stay safe in thought, or step into growth through action. One leads to stagnation. The other leads to clarity. You don't need to know how it ends. You need to know how it starts. And it starts with movement. This chapter is about reversing the lie you've been told. The lie that clarity comes first. The lie that confidence is required. The lie that certainty is necessary. It's not. Action is necessary. Once you accept that, something shifts. You stop asking, "Am I ready?" And you start asking, "What's the next move?" That question changes everything. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You need momentum. And momentum only comes from action. You've now learned two truths. Someday is a lie, and clarity follows action. But there's another cost most people never calculate. The silent cost of waiting itself. You've stopped waiting for readiness. Now let's talk about what waiting is actually stealing from you. Chapter 3. The cost of waiting is invisible. Waiting feels harmless. That's why it's so dangerous. It doesn't hurt right away. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. Lost time doesn't scream. It disappears quietly. That's the key. When you wait, nothing explodes. Nothing breaks. Nothing forces urgency. Life keeps moving. Days keep passing. And you stay comfortable enough to believe you're fine. Until you're not. You don't feel regret until it's too late. That phrase matters because regret is delayed pain. It doesn't hit you in the moment you hesitate. It hits you later, when the window has closed. And by then, the cost is already paid. You have a choice. You can pay the price of discomfort now, or you can pay the price of regret later. One is temporary. The other is permanent. Most people choose later because later feels far away. But later always arrives. Lost time doesn't scream. It disappears quietly. Think about how people actually lose their lives. Not in dramatic moments. Not in obvious failures. They lose it in small delays. I'll start next month. I'll take care of my health after this busy season. I'll go after that opportunity when things settle down. Things never settle down. Life doesn't open a clean window and say, now it's safe. Life stays messy, unpredictable, demanding. So if you're waiting for calm, you're waiting forever. You don't feel regret until it's too late. Health is the clearest example. No one wakes up one day suddenly unhealthy. It happens quietly. Skipped workouts. Ignored symptoms. Years of I'll deal with it later. Later shows up as pain, as limitation, as a body that won't do what you ask anymore. And by then, motivation doesn't matter. Wishes don't matter. Only past behavior matters. That's the key. The same is true with opportunity. Opportunities don't announce a countdown. They don't warn you before they expire. They just stop being available. Someone else takes the role. The market changes. The moment passes. And you're left saying, I almost did that. Almost is a painful word. Almost means you saw it. Almost means you wanted it. Almost means you hesitated. You don't need their permission. You need urgency. Because urgency is not panic. Urgency is respect for time. Most people don't respect time because time feels infinite. Especially when you're young. Especially when things feel stable. But time is only infinite in theory. In reality, it's ruthless. Lost time doesn't scream. It disappears quietly. And used potential works the same way. You don't feel the weight of it daily. You don't wake up suffocating under it. You feel it later. When you realize you never tested yourself. Never pushed. Never found out what you were capable of. That's a heavy realization. Not because you failed, but because you never tried. You don't feel regret until it's too late. That's why waiting is so seductive. It offers comfort now in exchange for pain later. And the mind always prefers now. That's the key. Waiting tells you, you're being responsible. You're being cautious. You're being realistic. But realism without action is just fear with better language. Ask yourself this. What is waiting actually giving you? Safety. Or just the illusion of safety? Because nothing is safer than staying the same. And nothing is more dangerous than wasting time. You have a choice. You can continue delaying and let time make decisions for you. Or you can decide to act and take control of the timeline. Time will move either way. That's the part you can't escape. The only question is whether time works against you or for you. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect timing. You need awareness. Awareness that every delay has a cost, even if you can't see it yet. Lost relationships. Lost momentum. Lost confidence. Because waiting doesn't keep you neutral. It slowly erodes belief. The longer you don't act, the harder action feels. The longer you delay, the bigger the task becomes in your mind. That's how waiting compounds. Not just in time, but in fear. You don't feel regret until it's too late. By the time regret shows up, it doesn't ask permission. It doesn't soften its voice. It doesn't care about your reasons. It just asks one question. Why didn't you move when you could? That's a hard question to answer. And most people don't answer it honestly. They distract themselves. They rationalize. They blame circumstances. But deep down they know. They waited. Lost time doesn't scream. It disappears quietly. The solution is not panic. The solution is action. Small action. Immediate action. Imperfect action. Because action stops the bleeding. Action turns time from an enemy into an ally. Action compounds instead of eroding. One step today does more than 10 plans for tomorrow. That's the key. You don't need to reclaim all lost time. You can't, but you can stop losing more. And that decision changes everything. The moment you move, you interrupt the quiet loss. You stop letting days slip by unnoticed. You start creating evidence that you're alive, engaged, present. You have a choice. Let time disappear quietly, or use it deliberately. This chapter is not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. Waiting feels harmless until it's not. Delay feels safe until it costs you something you can't get back. And the cost is always higher than you expected. You don't feel regret until it's too late. So don't wait for regret to teach you what urgency could teach you now. You've seen the lie of someday. You've learned that clarity follows action. Now you understand the invisible cost of waiting. There's one more truth you need before momentum becomes inevitable. Waiting feeds fear, but movement weakens it. You've counted the cost. Now it's time to confront the thing that keeps you frozen. You've seen what waiting steals. Now let's talk about how action changes fear itself. Chapter 4. Fear shrinks when you move. Fear is not your enemy. Stillness is. Fear only has power when you stop moving, when you pause, when you overthink. Fear grows in stillness and weakens in motion. That's the key. Most people believe fear must disappear before they act. That's wrong. Fear disappears because you act. Say it clearly. Action starves fear. Fear feeds on imagination. It grows when you sit still and replay scenarios. It multiplies when you let your mind run unchecked. But fear cannot survive contact with reality. Reality is concrete. Reality gives feedback. Reality exposes exaggeration. And action drops you into reality. Action starves fear. You have a choice. You can sit with fear and let it grow. Or you can move and force it to shrink. One strengthens fear. The other weakens it. Stillness makes fear feel intelligent. It makes it sound logical. It convinces you it's protecting you. But fear doesn't protect your future. It protects your comfort. That's the key. Fear says, wait. Be careful. Think more. And while you listen, time passes. But when you move, even a little, fear loses authority. Because fear depends on uncertainty. And action creates certainty. Not about outcomes, but about your ability to handle whatever happens. That's the shift. You don't need fear to disappear. You need proof that you can act despite it. That proof only comes from movement. You don't need their permission. You don't need confidence. You need to step forward once. Look at the first time someone does anything hard. The first workout. The first phone call. The first uncomfortable conversation. Fear is loud before it happens. Heart racing. Mind catastrophizing. And then they do it. And something surprising happens. Fear drops. Not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to think clearly. Enough to realize it wasn't as dangerous as imagined. Action starves fear. Say it again. Action starves fear. The hardest part is always before the first step. After that, momentum helps. But if you never take that first step, fear stays in charge. Most people don't have too much fear. They have too little action. That's the key. Fear is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're standing at the edge of growth. Stillness misinterprets that signal as danger. Action interprets it as opportunity. You have a choice. Listen to fear and stay where you are. Or move with fear and grow. One preserves the familiar. The other creates change. Fear thrives on delay. Every postponed action gives fear more material. What if you fail? What if you look stupid? What if this goes wrong? Action cuts through that noise. When you act, you replace what if with now I know. That's the key. You don't need to win on the first try. You just need to engage. Engagement breaks paralysis. Paralysis comes from treating fear like a wall. It's not a wall. It's a fog. And fog clears when you move through it. Standing still keeps you blind. Walking reveals the path. Action starves fear. Look at fear in the body. Before action, tension builds. Before action, anxiety spikes. During action, the body regulates. Breathing steadies. Focus sharpens. Because the body was designed for movement, not avoidance. Avoidance tells your nervous system there's danger everywhere. Action tells it you're capable. That's the difference. You don't need their permission. You don't need reassurance. You need to move your body and your life forward. Fear shrinks when you move. That sentence is not motivational, it's practical. If you're afraid of the gym, go anyway. If you're afraid of the call, dial anyway. If you're afraid of starting, start anyway. Not perfectly, not confidently, just deliberately. Each action is a vote against fear. Each step weakens it. Fear doesn't disappear overnight, but it loses ground daily when you move. That's the key. People who seem fearless are not fearless. They've just learned that fear doesn't deserve obedience. They act first. They let fear catch up. And eventually, fear learns it's not in charge. You have a choice. Live controlled by fear. Or train fear to follow you. Fear follows movement. Always. This chapter is about reclaiming authority. Fear is loud only when you're still. Once you move, it has to adapt. And fear is bad at adapting. It only knows one tactic. Stall. Movement breaks that tactic. You've learned that waiting has a cost. You've learned that clarity follows action. Now you understand that fear itself is weakened by motion. That changes how you respond to it. You stop asking, how do I get rid of fear? You start asking, what action will starve it? That question turns fear into fuel. You've faced fear directly. You've learned to move anyway. Now it's time to address the most respectable excuse of all, preparation. Because once fear loses power, preparation becomes the next hiding place. You've moved through fear. Now let's talk about why preparation must end. Chapter 5. Stop preparing and start executing. Preparation feels productive. That's why it traps so many people. It looks like work. It sounds responsible. It feels safe. But preparation becomes procrastination when it never ends. That's the line most people cross without realizing it. They tell themselves they're being smart. They tell themselves they're being thorough. But what they're really doing is avoiding exposure. Execution beats readiness. That's the key. There is a moment when preparation stops helping and starts hurting. When research turns into delay. When planning turns into protection. And most people live there. You see it everywhere. People reading about starting a business for years, but never launching. People watching fitness videos instead of training. People taking course after course, waiting for confidence to appear. Confidence doesn't appear in preparation. It's built in execution. You don't think your way into competence. You earn it through action. You have a choice. You can keep preparing until you feel safe, or you can execute while you still feel unsure. One clear rule separates progress from stagnation. If preparation doesn't end in action, it's avoidance. Execution beats readiness. Say it again. Execution beats readiness. The world doesn't reward people who are ready. It rewards people who are effective. And effectiveness comes from feedback. Feedback comes from action. Action comes from deciding to move before you're comfortable. That's the key. Let's be honest about what preparation really gives you. It gives you the feeling of control. It keeps you from being judged. It delays the moment you might fail publicly. So you stay hidden. You stay in theory. You stay in practice mode forever. But practice without performance is just rehearsal for a life you never live. You don't need their permission. You don't need one more book. You don't need one more video. You need to test yourself. Real learning happens when stakes are real, when consequences exist, when results matter. That's why execution accelerates growth. You learn more from one failed attempt than from months of planning. You learn faster when reality pushes back. Preparation is silent. Execution speaks. And what it says is honest. You have a choice. Stay comfortable and informed. Or step into action and get real data. Because data changes everything. When you execute, confusion turns into clarity. When you execute, fear turns into feedback. When you execute, you stop guessing and start knowing. Execution beats readiness. Most people over-prepare because they think knowledge creates certainty. It doesn't. Knowledge creates options. Action creates direction. That's the key. Direction only appears after movement. Before execution, everything feels possible and overwhelming. After execution, things become specific. This worked. This didn't. This needs adjustment. And suddenly, the fog clears. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a rough draft. You don't need mastery. You need momentum. Look at any skill worth having. You didn't learn to walk by researching biomechanics. You didn't learn to speak by studying grammar first. You learned by doing it badly, falling, sounding foolish, and you adjusted. That's how humans actually learn. But somewhere along the way, you were taught to avoid mistakes, to be polished, to be prepared. So now you hesitate. You think failure is a signal to stop. But failure is just data. That's the key. Execution turns mistakes into teachers. Preparation turns mistakes into fears. You don't need their permission. You need to tolerate imperfection, because imperfect action is the fastest path forward. Ask yourself this. What are you preparing for that you could already be doing? Not perfectly, not confidently, but actively. That answer matters, because preparation often hides a deeper fear, the fear of being seen as a beginner. But every expert was once visible as a beginner. The only difference is they moved through that phase instead of hiding from it. Execution beats readiness. Say it until it replaces your old instinct. Execution beats readiness. You don't become ready and then execute. You execute until readiness catches up. That's the order. The longer you delay execution, the more pressure you create. The more perfect it has to be. The scarier it becomes. Execution early reduces pressure. It lowers stakes. It keeps things flexible. That's the key. Small actions now prevent big regrets later. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You will never feel fully prepared. There will always be more to learn, more to improve, more to refine. If you wait for enough, you'll wait forever. So you choose. You have a choice. You can stay in preparation mode and protect your ego, or you can execute and build your future. Only one of those leads anywhere. Preparation feels safe. Execution builds confidence. Preparation feels smart. Execution creates results. Preparation hides fear. Execution exposes strength. You don't need their permission. You need to move. This chapter is about breaking the addiction to readiness, about recognizing when preparation has overstayed its welcome. Because growth doesn't happen in theory. It happens in reality. You've learned that waiting has a cost. You've learned that fear shrinks when you move. Now you've learned that preparation without execution is just delay. Once you start executing, something powerful happens. Momentum appears, and momentum changes everything. You've stopped preparing. You've started executing. Now let's talk about how momentum is actually created, and why most people are waiting for it instead of building it. Chapter 6. Momentum is built, not found. Most people are waiting for momentum. They say it like it's something you stumble upon. Like one day you'll wake up and feel unstoppable. Like motivation will suddenly flood in and carry you forward. That day rarely comes. Momentum is not found. Momentum is built. That's the key. And the way you build it is simple, but not easy. You move. Motivation does not come first. Progress does. Say it clearly. Motivation follows progress, not the other way around. Most people reverse the order. They wait to feel motivated before they act. So they never act. So they never build momentum. It's a closed loop. Motion creates emotion. That phrase matters because it explains everything. When you move, your state changes. When your state changes, your thoughts change. When your thoughts change, your behavior changes. Stillness does the opposite. Stillness magnifies doubt. Stillness feeds hesitation. Stillness makes everything feel heavier than it is. That's why doing something is always better than doing nothing. You have a choice. You can sit still and wait for motivation. Or you can move and let motivation catch up. One leads to stagnation. The other leads to momentum. Motion creates emotion. Say it again. Motion creates emotion. Look at how confidence actually grows. It doesn't appear because you tell yourself affirmations. It doesn't show up because you visualize success. Confidence grows when you keep promises to yourself. When you do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it. That's the key. Small actions done daily build evidence. Evidence builds belief. Belief fuels momentum. And momentum changes how everything feels. A single workout doesn't transform your body, but it changes your identity slightly. I'm someone who trains. One productive hour doesn't change your career, but it changes your trajectory. I can move forward. These small shifts stack. That's how momentum is built. You don't need their permission. You don't need a breakthrough moment. You need consistency. People underestimate the power of small actions because they're unimpressive. They don't feel heroic. They don't create instant results. But they do something more important. They change how you see yourself. That's the key. When you act consistently, your self-image updates. You stop seeing yourself as trying. You start seeing yourself as doing. And once that identity shifts, motivation becomes easier. Not because life gets easier, but because resistance gets weaker. Motion creates emotion. Momentum doesn't arrive as a rush. It arrives as reduced friction. Things that felt heavy start to feel normal. Things that felt intimidating start to feel routine. That's when people say, "I'm finally motivated." But they're wrong. They're not motivated. They're in motion. You have a choice. You can chase emotional highs, or you can build structural momentum. Chasing highs is unstable. Building momentum is reliable. That's the difference between people who start and people who finish. Most people quit because they mistake a lack of motivation for a signal to stop. But it's just a signal to keep moving. Momentum isn't loud at first. It's quiet. It shows up as less resistance in the morning, less internal debate, less negotiation with yourself. That's progress. Execution creates proof. Proof builds trust. Trust fuels momentum. That's the cycle. And the cycle starts with action. Not massive action. Not dramatic action. Daily action. That's the key. One page written. One workout completed. One call made. Small wins are not small when they're consistent. They stack. They compound. They change your baseline. You don't need their permission. You don't need to feel inspired. You need to move today. Because momentum does not care how you feel. It responds to what you do. Motion creates emotion. Say it until it overrides hesitation. Motion creates emotion. Here's where most people sabotage themselves. They wait for a big result to feel encouraged. But big results require momentum. And momentum requires time. So they quit early. Right before things would have gotten easier. That's the tragedy. The hardest phase is the beginning. The phase with the least feedback and the most resistance. If you survive that phase, momentum takes over. But you can't skip it. You have a choice. Quit because it feels slow. Or continue because it matters. One leads back to zero. The other leads forward. Momentum doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. Show up. Do the work. Repeat. That's it. This chapter is about correcting the lie that motivation comes first. It doesn't. Action comes first. Momentum follows. Motivation shows up last. And once it does, it stays. As long as you keep moving. You've stopped waiting. You've started executing. You've begun building momentum. Now it's time to understand where real progress is actually made. Not in dramatic moments. Not in big breakthroughs. But in the days that look ordinary. You've built motion. Now let's talk about where that motion must be applied. Chapter 7. Your future is built in ordinary days. Most people are waiting for a big moment. A breakthrough. A turning point. A dramatic change that suddenly fixes everything. That moment rarely comes. Life doesn't change in explosions. It changes in repetitions. Ordinary days decide extraordinary lives. That's the key. The days that don't feel important. The days that feel boring. The days no one notices. Those are the days doing the real work. Most people underestimate ordinary days because they don't feel powerful. There's no adrenaline, no applause, no immediate reward. So they disengage. They wait for motivation. They wait for inspiration. They wait for something to feel different. But the future is being built anyway. You have a choice. You can treat ordinary days like they don't matter. Or you can treat them like everything depends on them. Because it does. Ordinary days decide extraordinary lives. Look at anyone you admire. Strip away the highlight reel. Ignore the outcome. What you'll find is routine. Uncelebrated mornings. Predictable schedules. Boring habits repeated for years. No one sees that part. No one claps for consistency. But consistency is what compounds. That's the key. People think success is about intensity, about big pushes and dramatic effort. It's not. It's about reliability. Can you show up when nothing exciting is happening? Can you do the work when it feels pointless? Can you repeat the same discipline without immediate feedback? That's where futures are decided. You don't need their permission. You don't need external validation. You need standards. Standards don't change based on mood. Standards don't care if the day feels special. Standards are executed regardless. That's the difference between people who drift and people who build. Ordinary days decide extraordinary lives. Say it again. Ordinary days decide extraordinary lives. Most people sabotage themselves on ordinary days. They think, it won't matter if I skip today. They think, I'll make it up later. They think, today isn't important. But later is built from today. And skipping compounds just like discipline does. That's the part people miss. One missed day turns into two. Two turns into a pattern. And patterns become identity. You don't fall off track in one dramatic failure. You drift off track through small neglect. That's the key. Habits don't just build results. They build who you are. Every ordinary day you follow through, you reinforce the identity of someone who can be trusted. Every ordinary day you don't, you reinforce hesitation. And your mind keeps score. You have a choice. You can let ordinary days slip by unnoticed. Or you can use them as training. Training for what? For discipline. For reliability. For becoming someone who doesn't need excitement to perform. That's power. Because life is mostly ordinary. Most days are not life-changing on their own, but they are life-defining in sequence. Ordinary days decide extraordinary lives. Look at routines. Routines are not exciting. They are repetitive, predictable, sometimes boring. But routines remove friction. They reduce decision-making. They protect progress from mood. That's the key. When you rely on routine, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking, do I feel like it? You already decided. That's discipline. Uncelebrated discipline is the real advantage. Not talent. Not luck. Not motivation. Discipline done quietly, consistently, without drama. That's what builds the future. You don't need their permission. You don't need recognition. You need to respect the process. The process doesn't reward intensity. It rewards consistency. Most people quit because ordinary days feel thankless. They don't feel progress fast enough. They don't see results soon enough. So they stop. And that's why they never experience compounding. Compounding is invisible at first. Just like waiting's cost was invisible. But unlike waiting, compounding works in your favor. If you stay. That's the key. You don't need to win today. You need to show up. You don't need to feel great. You need to follow the plan. Ordinary days don't ask for heroics. They ask for presence. And presence repeated becomes power. You have a choice. Treat today like it doesn't matter. Or treat today like it's shaping who you're becoming. Because it is. Every ordinary day you honor your habits. You cast a vote for the future version of yourself. Every ordinary day you break them. You cast a vote against it. That's the truth. Ordinary days decide extraordinary lives. This chapter is about removing the fantasy of transformation. The fantasy that something big has to happen. It doesn't. What has to happen is consistency. And consistency is built when you respect ordinary days. You've learned to move. You've built momentum. Now you know where that momentum must live. In routines. In habits. In boring, repeated effort. But there's still one obstacle left. The belief that someone else will keep you accountable. They won't. You've learned the power of ordinary days. Now it's time to confront responsibility itself. Chapter 8. No one is coming to push you. At some point, you have to face this. No one is coming to push you. No one is coming to remind you. No one is coming to make it easier. Waiting for accountability is just another delay tactic. That's the key. People tell themselves, I just need the right coach. the right partner, the right system. And while those things can help, they are not the foundation. Because if someone has to push you, you are not leading yourself. Self-leadership is non-negotiable. Say it clearly. Self-leadership is non-negotiable. Most people outsource responsibility. They wait for deadlines. They wait for pressure. They wait for consequences. And when none of that shows up, they stall. But real progress happens when you act without supervision, when no one is watching, when no one is checking, when no one cares. That's where character is built. You have a choice. You can depend on external pressure, or you can create internal standards. External pressure is temporary. Internal standards are permanent. That's the difference. Look at how people actually perform. They show up when someone is expecting them. They meet deadlines when there's a boss. They push harder when someone is watching. But what happens when the pressure is removed? Most people slow down. They negotiate. They drift. Because they were never leading themselves. Self-leadership is non-negotiable. You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement. You don't need praise. You need ownership. Ownership means you do the work even when no one knows you're doing it. Even when no one thanks you. Even when no one notices. That's maturity. Waiting for accountability keeps you dependent. It trains you to perform only under observation. But your future won't be built that way. Your future will be built in solitude, in quiet decisions, in moments where quitting would go unnoticed. That's the key. Most people quit when no one is watching, because no one is holding them accountable. But accountability is not something you wait for. It's something you practice. You hold yourself accountable by doing what you said you would do, even when there are no consequences for not doing it. That's real strength. You have a choice. You can blame the lack of support, or you can become your own standard. One keeps you stuck. The other makes you dangerous. Self-leadership is non-negotiable. Let's talk about applause for a moment. Applause is addictive. Recognition feels good. Support feels motivating. But relying on it is weakness. Because applause is inconsistent. Support fades. People get busy. If your effort depends on praise, your progress will collapse. That's the truth. You don't need their permission. You don't need validation. You need discipline. Discipline means you do what needs to be done, not because it feels good, but because it's required. That's the key. The strongest people are not the most supported. They are the most self-directed. They don't wait to be pushed. They push themselves. They don't wait for reminders. They set standards. They don't wait for accountability. They create it. And here's the uncomfortable part. If no one is pushing you, that's normal. That's life. Life doesn't coach you. It doesn't motivate you. It doesn't care. So if you don't lead yourself, no one else will. You have a choice. Keep waiting for support that may never come, or become the person who moves regardless. One leads to excuses. The other leads to results. Self-leadership is non-negotiable. Accountability doesn't start with others. It starts with identity. I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who does the work. I'm someone who doesn't need to be chased. Those are decisions, and decisions shape behavior. You don't need a cheerleader. You need standards that don't change. Standards for how you wake up. Standards for how you work. Standards for how you finish what you start. That's how self-leadership is practiced. This chapter is about removing the illusion of external rescue. No one is coming to push you. And that's not a disadvantage. It's freedom. Because once you accept that, you stop waiting. You stop blaming. You start leading. You've learned to act. You've learned to build momentum. You've learned to respect ordinary days. Now you've accepted responsibility. But there's still one thing that stops people even after they take responsibility. The belief that they need confidence first. They don't. You've accepted leadership. Now let's talk about commitment. Chapter 9. Day 1 requires commitment, not confidence. Most people are waiting for confidence. They think confidence is the green light. They think confidence is the signal to begin. They think once they feel sure, they'll move. That's backwards. Confidence is not a prerequisite. Confidence is a reward. That's the key. Day one does not require confidence. Day one requires commitment. Say it clearly. Commit first. Confidence follows. Most people never experience confidence because they never commit. They hesitate. They test the waters. They keep one foot out the door. And when things get uncomfortable, which they always do, they quit. Not because they weren't capable, but because they never decided. You have a choice. You can wait to feel confident and stay stuck. Or you can commit without confidence and grow into it. One leads nowhere. The other leads forward. Commit first. Confidence follows. Look at how confidence actually develops in real life. Beginners don't start confident. They start awkward, uncertain, inexperienced. But the ones who commit, who stay, eventually pass people who were more talented. Why? Because talent without commitment quits early. And commitment without confidence keeps moving. That's the difference. Talent feels good at the beginning. Commitment matters at the end. That's the key. Confidence is built through proof. Proof comes from repetition. Repetition comes from commitment. There is no shortcut. You don't wake up confident. You earn it by surviving discomfort. You earn it by showing up again after a bad day, after a mistake, after embarrassment. That's where confidence is forged. You don't need their permission. You don't need to believe in yourself yet. Belief comes later. What you need is a decision that doesn't change when your emotions do. That's commitment. Most people confuse commitment with motivation. They are not the same. Motivation is emotional. Commitment is contractual. Motivation says, I'll do it if I feel like it. Commitment says, I do it because I decided. That's the key. Commitment removes negotiation. Once you commit, the question is no longer if you'll act, only how you'll execute. And that simplifies everything. You have a choice. Live in emotional negotiation, or live under a standard. Standards don't care how you feel. That's why they work. Confidence is fragile at the beginning. It's easily shaken. It disappears at the first sign of resistance. Commitment is stronger. Commitment holds when confidence fails. That's why commitment must come first. Commit first. Confidence follows. Look at beginners who succeed. They don't look impressive early on. They struggle. They fail publicly. They progress slowly. But they don't leave. Meanwhile, the naturally gifted quit when things stop being easy, when praise fades, when progress slows, because they relied on confidence instead of commitment. That's the trap. Confidence built on talent collapses under pressure. Confidence built on commitment survives. That's the key. You don't need to feel ready for day one. You need to be willing to stay past day 10, past day 30, past the phase where it stops being exciting. That's where real separation happens. Most people can start. Very few can stay. Commitment is what allows you to stay. You have a choice. Quit when confidence dips. Or commit and let confidence grow naturally. One keeps you average. The other transforms you. Confidence doesn't show up and say, you're ready. It whispers later, you've been doing this long enough. That whisper only comes after repetition. You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement. You need endurance. Endurance comes from commitment, not belief. Belief is optional at the start. Commitment is not. That's the key. If you're waiting to feel confident before starting, you are waiting for a reward you haven't earned yet. And that reward is only paid in one currency: action over time. So stop asking, do I believe in myself? Ask a better question. Am I committed to showing up even when I don't? That question changes everything. Because commitment doesn't care about mood. It doesn't care about doubt. It doesn't care about fear. It only cares about follow-through. Commit first. Confidence follows. Say it again. Commit first. Confidence follows. Confidence grows quietly. It builds while you're busy working. It accumulates while you're focused on execution. One day, You look back and realize you're no longer guessing. You're no longer hoping. You know. And that knowing didn't come from thinking. It came from staying. This chapter is about removing the final excuse. Not someday. Not clarity. Not fear. Not waiting. Not preparation. Not motivation. Confidence. You don't need it to start. You need commitment. Once you commit, everything else becomes possible. And once you commit, the real work begins. Not deciding anymore, but executing daily without debate. You've accepted responsibility. You've chosen commitment over confidence. Now there's only one thing left. Making the decision permanent. Removing choice from the equation. Because consistency only becomes inevitable when the decision is final. You've committed. Now let's lock it in. Chapter 10. Decide once, then move daily. Most people make the same decision over and over again. Should I work out today? Should I focus today? Should I keep going today? And every time they reopen the question, they leak energy. Decision fatigue kills consistency. That's why the final shift is this. Decide once, then move daily. That's the key. Real discipline is not about willpower. It's about removing choice. Because every choice invites debate, and debate invites delay. The strongest people don't have stronger motivation. They have fewer decisions. They decided once. The decision is done. Now I execute. Say it again. The decision is done. Now I execute. Once a decision is final, action becomes automatic. There is no discussion, no emotional negotiation, no daily reset. You don't wake up asking if you'll act. You wake up asking how you'll execute. That changes everything. You have a choice. You can keep deciding daily and stay inconsistent. Or you can decide once and make consistency inevitable. One drains you. The other frees you. Most people think freedom comes from flexibility. It doesn't. Freedom comes from structure. Structure removes friction. Structure removes excuses. Structure protects progress from mood. That's the key. Look at habits. The people who stick with habits don't rely on discipline every day. They rely on systems. I train at this time. I work on this daily. I don't negotiate with this standard. There's no drama. No decision-making. No emotional story. The decision is done. Now I execute. When you remove choice, behavior stabilizes. You stop asking, do I feel like it? Because your feelings are no longer in charge. Standards are. You don't need their permission. You don't need motivation. You need finality. Finality is powerful because it closes escape routes. Most people leave themselves exits. I'll try. I'll see how it goes. I'll do it when I can. Those phrases keep the door open for quitting. Deciding once closes the door. That's the key. When the decision is final, quitting is no longer an option. Only adjustment is. You don't ask whether you'll show up. You adjust how you show up. Low energy. You still move. Bad mood. You still execute. Messy day. You still do the minimum. Minimum beats zero. Daily action compounds only when it's uninterrupted. You have a choice. Live reactively, guided by emotion. Or live deliberately, guided by decision. One leads to chaos. The other leads to consistency. Consistency is not exciting. It's effective. And effectiveness beats excitement every time. The decision is done. Now I execute. Say it until it becomes your default. The decision is done. Now I execute. This is how habits stop being fragile. When habits are optional, they break under stress. When habits are decided, they survive pressure. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. That's the key. Systems only work when decisions are already made. You don't decide to brush your teeth every morning. You just do it. That's the level your goals need to reach. Automatic. Non-negotiable. Boring. Boring is good. Boring means reliable. You don't need their permission. You don't need excitement. You need repeatability. Most people fail because they keep reopening decisions. Every reopened decision invites doubt. Every doubt slows momentum. Decide once. What time you wake up. What you train. Would you work on daily? Decide it and stop revisiting it. That's discipline. And discipline is not restrictive. It's liberating. Because once the decision is done, your mind is free. Free to focus. Free to execute. Free to improve. No more arguing with yourself. No more starting over mentally every morning. The decision is done. Now I execute. You have a choice. Live in constant negotiation. Or live under a clear standard. Standards create calm. Negotiation creates stress. That's the difference. Daily movement doesn't require intensity. It requires presence. Show up. Do the work. Repeat. That's how identity is locked in. At some point, you stop trying. You just are. You are someone who moves daily. You are someone who executes. You are someone who finishes. That identity doesn't come from motivation. It comes from decided behavior. That's the key. This is where the journey completes its loop. You stopped believing in someday. You acted before clarity. You saw the cost of waiting. You moved through fear. You stopped preparing and started executing. You built momentum. You respected ordinary days. You accepted self-leadership. You committed without confidence. Now you remove choice. Because the highest level of discipline is not effort. It's inevitability. When your actions are inevitable, results are inevitable. And inevitability begins with one final decision. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you feel ready. Now. The decision is done. Now I execute. Carry that sentence with you. Repeat it when resistance shows up. Repeat it when motivation fades. Repeat it when doubt gets loud. Because doubt doesn't matter anymore. The decision is already made. And once the decision is made, your only job is to move. Daily, quietly, relentlessly. That is how day 1 becomes day 100. That is how ordinary days become a different life. That is how you win, not once, but permanently. The decision is done. Now execute. Here's the truth you can't escape. A year from now will arrive whether you act or not. The only difference is who you become between now and then. You don't need more time. You don't need more information. You don't need more confidence. You need a decision. So here's the challenge. When this audiobook ends, choose one thing you've been postponing and start it today. Not perfectly, not publicly, just deliberately. Mark it as day 1. And tomorrow, do it again. Because one day is always a lie. Day 1 is a decision. If you enjoyed this audiobook, like, share, comment, and subscribe for the new you is only a chapter away.